Hello, this is Jette Wagen and this is the fourth and final video in which I will be introducing QGIS 3.4 long-term stable release. In this video I will extensively deal with how you can work with styles, symbols, templates and use the layout manager in QGIS. Okay, we'll begin with creating a style for a layer, save that style and apply it to a different layer. So in order to show this, I want to work with my LiDAR data. So I will enable my layer H and 3 uitsneden, and I will go into the properties of that layer, and I will go to the Symbology tab. Now I've been through this Symbology tab in an earlier video. Just to mention, it's set to single band pseudo color with some properties of how my color ramp, which are the colors I attribute to the values in the first and only band of this raster, and those are of course the elevation values, and some properties on how those colors are actually specifically attributed to specific elevation values. So what I want to show is first of all how you can change this color ramp. And if we would double click left mouse button on the color ramp, we get into the select color ramp menu, and here we can change the color ramp. So what we could do is we could change the color of the gradient, and yes, we can select the stop and change it to a different color. Then select the next stop and again change it to a different color. And in this way we can interactively actually create a new color ramp for our layer. And if we apply that, you can see that it is immediately adjusted. And of course you can use that type of manipulation of the color ramp to make sure that specific colors single out details that you really want them to single out. Now suppose we have made a color ramp that we find aesthetically pleasing or very effective, or hopefully both. We would like to be able to use it also for other raster layers. We can right click on the color ramp and then select Save Color Ramp. We can now give it a name, so I will give it a name, let's say test 1. You can give it some text, but I won't bother with it. I will save it. And what we can now do is we can use this in the Symbology tab of the properties of a different raster file. Okay, so I should show that you can also right click on the color ramp and then go to the menu option Create New Color Ramp, in which you can you have many options of creating from scratch new color ramps. If we would select gradient, for example, we can here start again making a new color ramp in the same menu as you've just seen. Okay, now I canceled this one and it set the new color ramp of that menu to my as my color ramp of this layer, but I wanted the one I just created. So I again hit here on I hit the arrow. I will go to all color ramps, and here you can see my test 1. I'm back to where I was. I'll hit OK, and I'm happy with this. Okay, so and then to press the point that we can also apply this now very easily to other raster layers, we'll go to the complete sheet of age and data that I downloaded. I will go to the properties of that layer. I will go for the Symbology, select single band pseudo color, and it has already set this color ramp, but as you imagine, it's also to be found here in this all color ramps selection screen. I click OK, and there it is. So now I have the same color scheme for both my rasters. Now, clearly, something may strike you as interesting, which is that the color distribution actually over the values is different. So the same elevation values get different colors in two layers, although they use the same color ramp in the symbology. Now, why is this? It's not very difficult, the explanation. If we look at our downloaded LiDAR datasheet, we can see that the range from elevation values goes from 6.98 meters above sea level to 16.8 meters above sea level. Whereas for our cutout of the age and data, the range goes from 7.62 to something a bit above 12. And remember, in the first video, we artificially set the maximum value at 12 because we weren't interested in visualizing altitudes higher than 12 with a different color. But if we go into the property sheet of this cutout, and we would go to the tab Histogram, we can see the distribution, so the frequency distribution of the altitude values in this file. And then you can see that indeed the lowest value, the minimal value in the cutout, 7.62 meters, and it goes up to somewhere close to 15, which is actually 14.75. But because there were so few values in this area and we didn't really want to visualize the data, we got it at 12. Whereas on the other hand, if we go to the downloaded data sheet, here we have to compute histogram, so it doesn't have this information preloaded. You have to compute it using QGIS. You can see that there's a different distribution, and it goes from about 6 to above 16. So in order to make sure that the distribution of colors over the frequencies is similar, we have to set the minimum and the maximum to the same values. Now, the easiest way to do that in this case would be to change the minimum and maximum values, the values that define our range of elevation values. So I will set this artificially, although we do not have these values in this raster. I will set it nonetheless to the minimum value of the downloaded data sheet. Let's make it first here, and I will set the maximum to the maximum value of the downloaded data sheet, and I will go to 3 decimals, which will be clear enough. And if I then click OK, you can see that now indeed the color distribution over the altitude values is similar. So and indeed the cutout disappears into the background of the larger, exactly similarly visualized. Okay, so the situation with these two rasters also presents a nice showcase to show another functionality of working with styles, yes, because what we actually created was a color ramp, and all the subsequent steps of making sure that these color ramps work in the same way for two different raster layers was all done manually. Now there's another way to work with this, and I will show this. So if I go into the properties now of our LiDAR data sheet, we have this style now defined here, and instead of just saving the color ramp and then using it in other layers, what we can also do is we can go to this little menu over here, and we can save the style. And if we do that, we can create a QML, so QGIS layer style file. So let's do that, and let's save it on project location in our project. And I will also call this test 1. So this will now be, and what we now do is not only just the color ramp has been added to the style, but actually the complete definition. So the minimum and maximum values, as well as if we would have changed any of the color renderings, resampling settings, or whatever. And that means that now the color ramp is also tied to these values in this style. So that would be a faster way and a more complete way of saving this style and applying it to another layer to have it be visualized exactly the same. And so in order to demonstrate this principle, I will close the symbology of this layer, go to the LiDAR data cutout. I will give this a different visualization, so I will just revert back to something like this. Apply. So now we can see we have one of the default visualizations on this layer. I will then go into the properties again, go for the style menu option, hit load style, and then select the test1.qml version. Now what happens is we have now suddenly the values of the LiDAR sheet again. We have the selected color ramp, and if we would have set other options, that would also be imported onto this layer. Click OK. And here we are back with the visualization, which is a direct copy in all aspects of the downloaded LiDAR sheet. Now there's one thing I should add, and that is that this QML layer style definition is not only saving the information on the Symbology tab, but it's also saving other definitions like the layer the label definitions. So if you would, for example, in addition to specific color ramps and other raster visualization, also have styles for the vector data. So we may have, let's say, a color ramp that that refers to a categorization of our type of archaeological features, and then we would have maybe something like, actually go for this one, and then set a label to it. So let's say I would want to have these things labeled with their respective numbers. I will go to the actual trench. Here I see my layer. And now all these settings will be saved if I save the layer definition file. So if you have a standard layout for a company or institution or just as a personal specialist, you can make a whole range of these QML files to make sure that you can always very easily apply the same style definitions to your layers. Now, and then there's a final possibility to work with layers and styles, because what we've now been creating are layer definitions and style definitions, which are, let's say, general or not tied to, not contain pointers to the actual data. And it is possible, if you want to create a layer file that actually has all this symbology already saved within it. And I'll show you how to do that. So I will set this now for this trench 31. So if I go to the layer, I right click and go to export. I have here two options, save as a layer definition file and save as a QGIS layer style file. Now I'm sorry for the confusion. I've been talking about layer definition files, but actually the QML file, which acts as a template in which you can, let's say, insert all kinds of different shape files, is actually the QGIS layer style file. If we want the style definitions to actually contain a pointer to the data, and actually and thereby saving the data with it, we have to, we are talking about a layer definition file. So I will save as a layer definition file. I see here that this is a QLR. I will go to our folder in which we are working with the data, and I will call this layer test. Okay, and what we now actually did is we saved the data in its totality with its layer definition. And what we could now do, for example, if we would remove this from the layers panel, and I will turn off all the other layers that I have been that are now visualized. So now we have everything which is switched off, and I want to add the layer file again to our project. I'll go to layer, and I select add from layer definition file. Go again to our working folder, and now we can add this layer test. And what you can now see is that not only is the layer with all the data, all the vector data and the attribute table in its totality inserted, we also have the same visualization. And this can of course be very useful if you want to send these layers and treat them as different blocks of data with a visualization definition, send them to someone else, and just want this style to be contained and maintained within the layer. Okay, so this was a short overview of the different options that you have working with styles and layer definition and templates directly in QGIS. What I now want to get on with is to pick up again the layout manager, which we've seen before in the first video, and show you all the options of creating maps with QGIS. Okay, so let's do this. In order to do this, we go to project, and we go to the new print layout. We select this, and because I want to reuse this layout for other maps as well, I will give it a title that I can easily remember. So I will call this a feature map, for example, and hit OK. So we've been in this layout window before, which is a totally different component. And this time I will be using it to create a bit more advanced map and to show you a lot more features than I did in the first instance. So maximize, and I will begin with adding the information from the map canvas in QGIS desktop component to the map. So I use this button for that, adds a new map to layout, and I will insert my map over here. And what happens now, just to repeat, is that the information which is visible in our map canvas in QGIS is now directly opened in our layout editor. Okay, and then about the navigation, it's also to repeat first video. There's a difference between the various options. So I have here move item content, which means that we are actually moving the stuff that is in our in this area defining our map. So here we can browse through our data, and whereas on the other hand, if we use these navigation options, we are actually zooming in and out on the map itself. So again, if we use this one, we move the data, and if we for example use a scroll wheel, we can zoom in and out on the data, whereas on the other hand, if we use these buttons, we zoom in and out on our map. Okay, so the next thing to explain about the layout editor is that everything we add to our map is actually added here as an item to this list of items. And the list of items works similar to the layers panel in our QGIS desktop, in the sense that it acts as a table of contents of elements we have in our layout editor, and that we can also switch on or off and change the order of them. So let's, for example, add a scale bar. There it is. Just I will leave the default in place, and you will see that it's selected now, and that's why it's been bold. So the items which are bold are the items you selected, and we can also change the order of these items. And now map is above the scale bar and vice versa. Now that's that's inconsequential, because there's no overlap between these items. But obviously this can come in handy to change the order, and therefore also of course the visualization of your map. Now about these items then, in the window below, or in the panel below I should say, all these items have their item properties connected. And to give an example of what you can do with these item properties is, it is quite extensive. If I would, for example, alter the properties of the scale bar, I have here, for example, the main properties. So the map here is about what map window, so actually what this frame to which of these frames it's actually linked. And as you may imagine, you can add more frames if you, for example, want to create an inset map or an overview or whatever. You can tie the scale bar to a specific window, which is important because they are, of course, possibly on different scales. Well, to continue then, we can go for different styles. So you see here the style of the scale bar changing. So this is the single box. We can then set the units. So we just want to maybe change the unit being displayed. We can change the units of the scale bar and the label, which is the thing that the character displayed here. So if I set this to meter, it is going to be displayed as meters. Segments, you can add segments to the left, so below 0, which I'm not a fan of. You can add segments to the right. You can change the units of these segments, and so on and so forth. So let's say I want 5 meter units and I want 4 segments. So I have a scale bar which covers 20 meters and is, let's say, not too big and not too small part of my map. Now, in the options you can change go on and on. The box, you can change the properties of it. You can change font color being used, position, size. You can rotate it, and so on. It's extensive what you can change in the visualization of the scale bar. Okay, as another example of what we can adjust in all the properties of this of the various items, I will start to work a bit with the properties, the item properties of this little map window. Now, first of all, we have the main properties, which are scale, map rotation, and CRA. Now, the scale, we've already defined the scale by using the zoom function of our mouse wheel, but it may be possible that we would want to create a series of maps, maybe a map for every individual excavation trial trench, and we all want them at a similar scale. So if we would want that, we can here, for example, set the scale to a fixed value, and we can then repeat that with the other maps. So we are sure that we have every time the exact same scale. And you can see that the scale bar, of course, changes accordingly. So if I set it to 200, the scale bar is smaller, and so on and so forth. Then the second item here is map rotation. In this case, this may be interesting. I mean, we have now our trench properly pointing to the north. But if we would rotate it 90 degrees, we would actually make much more efficiently use of the space we have on this this sheet. So maybe this is an interesting thing to actually do. So let's change the size now of the map window. We then go to Content Navigator, and mouse wheel is not really giving us a very good interval, so we have to set it manually. So let's see where 100 gets us, 1 to 100, and that actually seems a quite nice scale to use. So now we have 1 to 100 with a map rotation of 90%. Now the final option here is to change the CRS. If well, we would possibly exchange this information with someone who is not used to working with the RDU system, but maybe something more general. We can, for the display of coordinates, for example, use another coordinate reference system. In this case, it's not really interesting to change that. Now we go on with some interesting properties. Layers, we follow the map theme, that's fine. We do that. Extends, it's all good. And for example, what would be interesting maybe is if we would create a grid. Now, what is a grid? A grid is actually a series of lines or markers of some sort with which you can indicate where the exact coordinates are on the map by using a grid or just using an outline with so-called ticks. So you make it easier for the person reading the map to interpret distances, for example. Now we can insert a grid by pushing here on the green button. We have the grid. We can modify the grid. So we can set, for example, the grid type. We can say we just markers. We want a solid grid. We could change the CRS if we want. I just want mouse with RD new. We could set the units, and here we can set the interval. So we're not yet seeing anything because we have not set any intervals. But if we would, for example, set it to 5 meters, you can now see that we have a grid forming a line at every 5 meter in our coordinate reference. Now I'm personally not all too fond of these kind of lines running through my map. Just to demonstrate, you can also go for different markers, but I still find them a bit disturbing, so I will choose to go for frame and annotations only. Now what does this allude to? The frame and annotation is actually allows you to modify the frame and add coordinates surrounding your map to still indicate this spatial reference information. So then I could, for example, say I want exterior ticks, so the ticks outside. Of course, I can set some kind of variations here in the variables, and I will then ask to draw the coordinates. So the coordinates, of course, come directly from the GIS. I think this is an excellent way for this map to visualize. I just want to change a little bit my items. So I want to have the scale bar to the inside so it doesn't interfere with my frame. Now this is the frame. I think the frame is a little bit too big, so I want to make it a bit smaller so I have enough space for the coordinates. Now the scale of my my map changed a little bit, so let's see if I can still keep it at 100. Yes, that fits very well. and then I want to go back to the frame, or to the grids, and then the actual markers surrounding the grids. Because although I'm fine with the way these coordinates are now being visualized, I want I don't think that these horizontal coordinates are really an efficient use of space, and of course they fall outside of the actual page here. So I want this to be displayed vertically. Now these settings you can adjust here. So I want the coordinates on the left, I want them vertical ascending, so we still reach from left to right if we turn the page. And I want on the right side, I want them to be vertical descending. So well, the same applies. Okay, and so now I'm happy. So I will leave it at this. I indeed do want to have this line, which I see, of course, because it's the selection line, but this which goes away when I click on another area in this window. But I do indeed want a line here, and for that I have to set a frame. So I will then go to this menu option, select frame, and now there's actually a frame being drawn around our map, our content window. Well, I think that's just a more neat visualization, and these sticks are not floating in the void, so to say. Okay, so what I also need in this map is a legenda. So let's turn to inserting the legenda. We already did this in the first video, but I'll go a little bit deeper into tweaking the legenda. So I will select option and draw my legenda rectangle here. Okay, and this is interesting because I am inserting this legenda, and although I'm only looking at the trench, all the information from the layer panel in my QGIS program has been added here, and that is way more than I want actually, because if I would want to visualize all this information, I would have to make all the items very small, and in any case they are not visible in this map. So I will now show you how we can adjust this. Now, in order to tweak the visualization of the legenda, I will go through a procedure that is by now familiar. So we have here the legenda. We can here edit the item properties. I'll make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. We can add here a legenda title. So I will leave it at legenda actually. I can change the title alignment. I'll put it in the center. I can select which map it should be connected, which is again map 1. And here I have the most important element, namely I can here select the legend items. Now I can leave it to auto update. If I change the auto update, I can now start selecting individual items in the legenda, and I can, for example, say I want to delete this by hitting this this red minus sign. It will be removed from the legenda, and then it's also automatically removed here. And so I can go through all the legenda items. I can also change their respective order, so I can put this in the top. But in the end, what's maybe an even easier way to edit all the items in the layer in the legenda is to use this simple button, which means filter legends by map content. So now I will only see in my legend what I have in my map content. If I click on that button, you can see that not only I will see the only the legenda that actually refers to this layer, It also, in comparison to the total features layer, contains much less features because only a few feature types are identified here. So now suddenly in one click I have a very overseeable and concise agenda. Now, personally, I'm not very fond of these subtitles here. French 31. This is something I would use, put into a title of the map, for example, and it says nothing really particular about the information which is here described. So, in order to change that, I would actually want to remove that little subtitle. Now, in order to do that, I will switch off auto update, so I can actually select now the trench 31, and I can go for this button, and I can change legend item properties through this little menu, and I can just remove the text, or I could, for example, place here something under interpretation. Okay, and we have a direct update. Okay, so I could now go on and explain all the other items here, but as I've already pointed out with the scale bar, there are many options to change symbols, fonts, columns, etc. I leave them to explore for yourself, and just leave it at this with this little agenda, with which I am happy. Okay, so finally now I want to insert two more items, being a north arrow and a title. Now the north arrow, the procedure for inserting a north arrow is maybe a little bit different than what you would do if you would have experience with other GIS packages. We could, for example, possibly insert a north arrow like this. Hold shift so it is tied to a straight axis, and then I right click, and now I have a north arrow. But actually what we draw here is a polyline, and this polyline is not very specifically tied to the rotation of my map, and I will explain in a couple of seconds what I mean by that. For now, I just want to say that this is a suboptimal way of dealing with north arrows, so I will now remove this by right-clicking it in the item list and select delete item. So the more efficient way to do this is by adding a new picture to the layout. So I add a picture, which is here, and now I can set here a picture, and I can select the search directories, which will go into a full set of scalable vector graphics that QGIS offers on install. And as you can see, there are many symbols here that you can use out of the box, but I actually just want a very simple north arrow. Now, it goes without saying that you can then adjust a lot of properties of that north arrow. So the interesting thing, I mean, we're talking about, or the function is called image, but we are actually not inserting a raster in this case, but a scalable vector graphic, which is SVG, so that vector says it already. This is actually a polygon that is scalable, which we can change the fill color and etc. etc. So let's do that, and we have a very nice black arrow, and you can see that we can change it without it losing any sharpness or whatever. Now there's an important thing to explain here, what I was already alluding to with the other arrow, and that is we can sync this with the map. And it means that the upper part of the image is actually oriented according to the orientation that we set for our map. So I will show how this works. We click on sync with the map. I select map 1, and then you can see that this north arrow actually flips, rotates 90 degrees, points to the right, which is of course as it should be, because remember that we rotated our trench 90 degrees to fit better on our sheet. So now the arrow is actually pointing towards the north the way I want it. And if we would now change the orientation of the trench for some reason, the north arrow will change accordingly, which is of course exactly what we need. Okay, so as I said, the final element that I want to insert is the title of this map. And for that I can just insert some text. And I can do this with this button over here. So, and this would then, for example, be the, of course, this is added to our item list, and I can now adjust the properties again, and this would then be a place to say that this is, for example, trench 31. The font, well, let's choose a nice font that we want to use. I want it a little bit bigger, so it's a title. Okay. Trench 31, yeah, and again, this is becoming repetitive, but we can adjust all kinds of properties here of that changes the visual appearance of this title. But for now, I would say that I'm happy with the way this map is now designed. It's very functional, and we can use it like this. Okay, so to finish then with the part of the layout designer here, I actually want to export this map as an image. Now let's do that. We can export as an image, as a scalable vector graphic or a PDF. And if we export as an image, we can say, well, this is indeed our feature map. We can say this is trench 31. And of course we can here select kinds of different file formats we save. We can set the export resolution, page width, page height, and etc. And we save it. And now we can indeed find the this printed map over here. Now, and if we would for some reason want to have a different page setup, we can go to the layout menu option and then go to page setup, and then we can choose for example, A3 or something. We can change the for portrait or landscape and so on. Okay, so and then finally about reusing this map template. What we can do now, we are happy with this design, is of course save it. And if we would, for example, now close this and go to QGIS again, we can see that if we now access our layouts, we have here feature map. We can also find it in our layout manager. And if we open this, we are again back in the map that we designed. So for example, if I would now want to use this map, but well, maybe this is better here. If I want to use this map but just use it for another trench, I can move the contents of the map window so I can get another trench in view. But another way to go about it would, for example, to be to duplicate this one and maybe append the trench number, and in that way create several templates for our trenches and work very quickly with all the same layout and design through all our trenches. Now and then, and I'll go back again. Another thing to what we may want to do, because this is all internally of this QGIS project and this installation of QGIS 3.4. Now, if I would want to save this externally of QGIS, so I could reuse it with a new version of QGIS, or I could send it to someone else to use it, etc. I can save the layout separately as a template. So if I go to the menu option layout and select save as template, I can go to the folder and have been working, and I'll go to the folder and here create a temple feature map, and this will get the file extension .p2, and I will save it. Now if I would start a fresh QGIS, I can insert the layout template. So let's just imagine that we do not have this feature map template in this version. I will set now new from template. I will go for specific. I will browse to the location where we save this map template. Here it is. I will select it. I will create it. I will call it a feature map. Yeah, sure. We just can. Well, if I do it now, it will probably not accept because it already exists. So let's call it copy. Hit OK, and there we have it again. So this is a way you can use them as separate template files. Now, and with this demonstration of the template files, I've come to the end of this fourth and final video on QGIS 3.4, and we've been dealing with tiles, templates, and some advanced map making possibilities of the program. So thank you for watching.